Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. This is your host, Dr. FM here, Dr. Francis Munangi Mpindu on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio, your number one African Caribbean online radio. We are live every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we do uh, welcome everybody at this particular time. I just received a call regarding our guest who is supposed to be joining us, and we hope that our chief engineer, Mr. TYB, will help us to connect with him so that we can continue with our program today. Again, so this is Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio, your number one African Caribbean online radio. And we go live every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we are live on YouTube, on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and of course, TikTok. And this is your host, Dr. FM. This is a safe space where Africa's stories, our innovations, our cultures, our transformations, and our voices come alive, from groundbreaking news and ideas, inspiring people, shaping our culture. We bring you conversations that inform, that uplift, and empower us as Africans and everybody who has an interest in Africa. So stay with us because Africa is on the move. And we have a very special guest today, and we are hoping that he will be able to log in so that we can have this conversation with him today. We're talking about change theory, dismantling dual economies. This is a very, very powerful and relevant topic. It really is, because when we have academicians and thought leaders like Prof.Mandi Rukuni, we are always excited to hear his perspectives, because he is the kind of person who has Africa at heart, and he has Africa in his mind. He has Africa in his emotions. I think I mentioned the last time he was here that he is one person who helped me to understand the value and the reason for spelling Africa with a K instead of a C, even though that name itself has different origins, but we are to spell it with a K, because most African countries, it's always a K. And we are delighted that he will be joining us all the way from across the Atlantic. And so we are delighted. I see that the prof himself has just entered the studio. And so we're delighted. We were just beginning to wonder what happened to Prof. We know that he's a busy man. He is a busy man. He has so many responsibilities and assignments and tasks. Like I said, he's the kind of person who has Africa at heart, Africa in mind, and Africa in his emotions as well. So he's one of those people, according to the famous phrase from Dr. Francis Kwame Nkrumah. He says, I'm not Africa because I was born in Africa. I'm African because Africa was born in me. And so we're delighted to have Prof.Mandi Rukuni. He is one of our finest African academician, thought leader, transformational leader. And we're just so delighted that you've joined us, sir. So thank you very much. This topic we have today, Professor Rukuni, change theory. We're talking about dismantling dual economies. Now, you are the academician. We want you to inform us, to inspire us, to educate us. So before we get into that, would you give us a quick update on what you've been up to lately? What's What's uh, what's making you stay up late? What have you been doing, Professor Rukuni?
Thank you so much, Dr. Pindu. My apologies. I think I had a senior moment. I've been looking forward to this all day, and then when it came to just getting ready to go into the studio, the senior moment struck, and but my assistant reminded me I should jump on. My apologies, but I've been retired for semi-retired, 72 now, but I'm still not too tired, so I still run around and do stuff.
You're
I've
looking
spent
very
most.
good at 72.
No, thank you so much. I spent most of the last 20 years mostly working on African issues. I was consumed with the comprehensive agricultural development program, CADP, at AUDA, Nepal, a whole bunch of these development partners. But COVID basically changed all that, and I stayed at home and in Zimbabwe and started spending more time on my own personal projects in Zimbabwe, and also following a lot of what both the state and the non-state actors were up to in terms of development. And I stopped traveling then. I was traveling 90% of the time until COVID. And now I'm traveling only maybe 5% of the time. And I do advise mostly now the Zimbabwe government. I work with a number of ministries who really have honored me and given me a chance to advise as an old man, as a senior citizen. I spend a lot of time on the land issue, agriculture, food systems, transformation. I do a lot of work for the Ministry of Higher and Tertiary Education. I am currently chair of Great Zimbabwe University and also chair of the Zimbabwe Council for Higher Education. So yes, that's what I'm up to these days. But my big issue, as we get into this issue of the dual economy, is I've been driving hard the concept of rural industrialization as the main solution to dismantling the dual economy in Africa and other parts of the world. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor Rukuni, for that update. And just listening to you, I'm like um, all excited to hear some of the things that you have been processing. And I know that you are a voice to many people, and I'm glad to hear that the Zimbabwean government, and I'm sure other governments, are benefiting from the resources that you have. You have such um, a wealth of experience, and we would be wise to make sure that we tap into these resources, not just intellectual, but you are a pragmatic practitioner. You get your hands dirty. I was delighted to learn recently that one of my friends, we grew up together in Glenora, um, in Harare, Dr. Taranike, Daudi Taranike, and his wife Christine. That you have been very inspirational in his life, and you continue to support some of their efforts. And actually, we had him on this broadcast as well. Very, very insightful comments and opportunities that we have had with him. And so we had you before, and I must say again that we will bring you back. And that's not a threat; it's a promise. We definitely want to make sure that we keep milking you so that we benefit from the nourishment that we receive from you. So we are talking about this change theory, dismantling dual economies. Now, why are you suggesting this change? I know that this is going to. Let me let me say this: we don't have enough time to cover everything, but before we get into it, what is it that has happened that now you feel that there has to be uh, this change and that things need to be dismantled?
Right. So if I summarize my career, if we go back to 1980, come back to Zimbabwe from diaspora, and I'm thinking Zimbabwe is one of those African countries which should quickly figure out how to transform a colonial economy into a broad-based industrial economy that must uplifts its people. And Zimbabwe, like most other African countries, tried very hard to do that. But as time went on, in fact, uh, so I'm talking 1980 when I went back. By 1993, then I'm asked by the president then, Mugabe, to chair a commission of inquiry. And looking at the land tenure systems that we have in Zimbabwe, I was also already influenced by my Western education, that problem with our land tenure system as Africans. Like many other things that we diagnose back to our old selves in terms of our culture, history. But it is that experience that showed me that there are many, many good elements about our culture which we have abandoned. And the land tenure system is one of them. Only to find that it was such a solid system which ensured continuity of land rights. But anyway, the long and the short is, as we move forward, I then get influenced by a very simple concept that all of us as scientists have been influenced by. In this particular case, Ernst Einstein himself, because he kept saying you cannot solve a problem by addressing it or analyzing it at a lower level than it was created. You have to analyze a problem at a higher level than it was created. So I asked myself, so what is it about Africa initially where we can say this is the highest level strategic analysis or problem that causes all the other problems that we have? And slowly but surely, it eventually dawned on me that the colonial experience, although colonization is done, what it did was create a dual economy. And I didn't know this until maybe 15 years ago, is in a dual economy. And I thought maybe there are exceptions. I thought maybe South Africa, being such an industrialized country, maybe Algeria, maybe Egypt, but every one of us in Africa, 55 out of 55 countries in Africa dual economies. So I eventually got to this conclusion in 2016 when I was asked by the South African government to advise them on their land reform program and their agricultural transformation program, only to find themselves in a deep, deep middle income trap. So when you have a dual economy, it just means that the majority of your people, in our case, because of colonization, industrialization left the majority of people outside the manufacturing processes. So even our small farmers don't supply manufacturers, they just supply secondary markets. So as long as you have a mass of your population disconnected from manufacturing, industrial, tertiary economic activities, you will end up in a middle income trap. Meaning is up to middle income status. You won't go beyond. Why? Because both ways, your industrial sector won't grow beyond a certain level. Your domestic market of people with middle incomes to be your major consumers of high level industrial products are not going to be there. So the only thing you can export. So the most advanced countries who are dual economies do it by export, whether it's Brazil or South Africa. Meanwhile, the majority of your population are poor and unemployed. So dual economy then became my highest level of, if you want, diagnosis. 55 out of 55 African countries, we are all in a dual economy. So yes, there are other problems, We have problems with politics. We have problems with management of our economies. We have problems with corruption. All those, however, those are secondary symptoms of the problem. The real problem is it doesn't matter whether you are in democracy or there's no corruption, you are stuck. And there are many examples. Look at Botswana. It wasn't run badly. By global standards, Botswana was well managed. But it's still a dual economy. And once the diamonds dry up, there is mass unemployment and poverty coming there. So this, in summary, is where I end up at. All African countries are dual economies. All South American countries are dual economies, from Mexico all the way down to Brazil, Chile, all of them. They are also not rising beyond middle income status. Only a few Asian tigers and the dragon have bust. The rest of the South Asian countries are also dual economies. So this, in summary, is a situation we have in Africa, all of South America, all of Africa, and most of Asia. If we don't figure out how to dismantle that dual economy and mass uplift the majority of people left out of the modernization part of the economy, nothing will save us. It's a structural problem. It's not a management problem. It's not democracy. It's not human rights. It's the structure of the economy. And I could then add that duality, once the economy is the tip of the spear. It is what we are most concerned about in the whole world. But it also masks two other dualities, which are more important than the economic duality, but the social capital in Africa is depleted because we have abandoned our African systems of family, community. We have abandoned our social capital, hoping that by some miracle we are going to be economically successful. We are also abandoning our environmental capital. So the dualism that we're experiencing at the economic level, we are also experiencing at a social and environmental level. So in summary, we have to dismantle the dual economy. We have to also dismantle the other dualities which stop us to really be a very advanced civilization, which we are at the cusp of, because Africa is going to be the next superpower after China. China is coming straight up after United States. It will be the next economic superpower within the next decade. And then within 30 to 50 years, Africa will be the next economic superpower in the world. And if we can just understand that we have to accelerate the pace of economic growth by dismantling the dual economy, if we grow at 6% average over the next 30 years, we will be the largest economy without any question. We don't have to grow at double-digit figures that China had to grow for more than 20 years to be the next superpower. We can grow at half their pace. We'll still be the superpower of the world.
Professor Rukuni, you are very articulate and you are very thought-provoking. And just listening to you, you're just whetting my appetite for, I guess, transformation and also being reflective. And I like the focus you're bringing about looking for solutions from within the African context. Now, you made reference to the impact of colonization. So we know that this is a structural problem, but it's also a historical issue here, or it has a historical tie that cannot be shaken off just like that. So it has taken us this long to get to where we are. And now, as we dialogue with people like Professor Rukuni, we're saying, wait a minute, let's think outside the box and let's think without the box and come up with solutions that will address these disparities. Now, I agree with that. and I think our viewers and our listeners would agree with that. We can't continue to blame the Western culture and civilization for where we are today. However, I think that if we are going to address some of the ideas you mentioned, or some of the challenges we have on the side still need to be addressed, but you're saying this is the main one. We have to dismantle the dual economies notions. So we have been made to think this way because of history. Now, how do we bring in new ways of thinking?
Well, in this particular case, I must admit, over the last 15 years, I've been immersed in studying the new structural economics school of thought, because I started catching up with this literature, because it was the only literature I could get which addressed the issue of how do you transform an economy bottom up. In other words, all fully industrialized high income countries without exception, from England as the first modern one 200 years ago, then the rest of Europe, then of course the Europeans took that to Canada, United States, Australia, and New Zealand. Without exception, the transformation starts with an agricultural revolution. Without exception, only an agricultural revolution can lead to an industrial revolution. The exceptions are just a few city states like Singapore. Otherwise, to head for a fully industrialized high income status, it's a bottom up approach. You start by massifying the production of raw materials in agriculture. That's what makes the cities viable. It's only when food is low cost in the cities. It's only when raw materials are abundantly available in the cities. It's only when the portion of the household income called food is a low percentage that you get the cities to start growing industrially. So manufacturing specifically, which is an element of industrialization, only becomes viable when the rural areas are humming, when the rural areas are producing massive amounts of raw materials, when the rural areas are supplying factories, not sending stuff to Mbaremsika, Mukoba. It is only when the rural sector has a manufacturing relationship with the urban sector that you have one economy, and then you have the mass upliftment of people, because in the industrialization at the end of the day is just the massification of producing raw material, then the massification of manufacturing and processing that raw material, and then the massification of consuming those products locally, not export. It's only when a country, an economy, mass produces its raw materials and mass processes it and mass consumes its own manufactured goods and services, you have the strongest economy. So if we have been discombobulated by colonials flying in whilst we are still at early stages of transforming our economies, we were slowly they didn't find us sleeping and doing nothing. We had gone through Stone Age, Iron Age. We had forges, we had guns, even we were trading with the Portuguese and others. We were on our way towards industrialization. If the British had come to Zimbabwe, as an example, in 1890 and started trading with us rather than colonizing us, it would be a 500 billion economy today in Zimbabwe. But they colonized. So when they colonized, they built small towns called Salisbury and so on and so, and they built their own manufacturing plants in there, and only a few hundred farmers, white, supply that industry. So when you have few industries in towns supplied by a few thousand farmers out there, you got a dual economy. It should be thousands upon thousands of small farmers mass producing, aggregating their products, and manufacturing starting in the rural areas. You don't have to manufacture everything in the city, because light industry happens in the rural areas. It doesn't happen in town. When you produce masses of grains, like in our case, with three, four types of traditional grains, meats, all sorts of animals we're killing, we're brewing our own beers. If that stuff, you upgrade the manufacturing process in the village and township, and today growth centers, even small towns, that's why you manufacture mill. Why do you need to manufacture mill and flour and milk in the city? Those are light industries. Okay, so if our rural people start manufacturing their own raw materials 25 kilometers, 30, I would say maximum 50 kilometers from where you are, you should do the three processes: mass produce the raw material, mass process it, and mass consume some of it, and you start exporting locally to the small towns, and so on and so forth. So this is why I'm driving rural industrialization as the answer, because I've looked at how Japan moved and how South Korea and some of those Asian tigers learned it, and then lately how China then took the same model to the highest level. They didn't need elections or democracy or this stuff. They didn't need any Western concept of self-organization. What they needed was to borrow the technologies, intelligently convert them and adapt them to their situation, and basically correct the structural problem by getting, and this is where it is politically difficult, the most politically difficult process in correcting a dual economy is that the majority become very powerful. Only a few businesses, monopolies and oligopolies, cartels now own the economy and sometimes even own the government. So to tip the budget architecture so that the majority of the public budget goes to rural areas, to put in the roads, to put in the technologies, to get the rural financial services working there, to get the rural areas to be economically viable, that becomes the most difficult element. And once you figure that out, and this is what the Asian tigers and dragon were able to figure out, the political economy element is how to ensure that monopolies, oligopolies, cartels can be also restructured so that they decentralize the industries. You don't compete with your small and medium-sized enterprises, because that's where most of the growth is to take place and where the employment is to happen. When you are in a dual economy and you are a labor abundant economy, you don't need labor saving technology. You don't need a few big manufacturing plants processing everything. You need labor utilizing technologies. Okay, so that's why you have to go rural, starting with technologies to upgrade agriculture, and then start processing in the village and township. So the Chinese in 1980, that's all they did, isn't it? They declared, no, the communist system is not delivering. We abandoned the communist system. All small farmers are now allowed to produce and sell to whoever you want to sell to. But at the same time, we as the government, we declare village and township manufacturing. You don't need to manufacture milli in Harare or Bulawayo. Does it make sense? Or in Johannesburg, or those are big cities where real estate is expensive. You manufacture sophisticated products and heavy industries in the big cities. At home, in the rural areas, you should be able to process everything like we used to process before colonization. We brewed our own beer. You didn't need to wait for beer to come from Harare. We brewed our own maheu. Only steps to manufacturing is putting it in a plastic and putting a lid on it and maybe slap a label. We processed all our milk into 3-4 different products, not very far from cheese, yogurt. Those are 2 steps away. You don't need to manufacture that in Harare. That can be manufactured in growth centers. Okay. Same thing with bread, same thing with mills, same thing with leather products, same thing with furniture. All those things, materials are in the rural area. They should be manufactured at home. Okay, that is until 19 population is now in urban areas. That's when then you expect some of those industries to migrate to us. Otherwise, as long as the majority of your people are rural, light industries should be driven in the rural areas. That is the structural adjustment that every African country has to do. But I can talk about the political economy challenges later if you want.
Dr. Rukuni, it's always a pleasure to have you, and very insightful. Again, our viewers, I am your host here, Dr. Mnangi, Dr. Francis Pindu Mnangi. This is your trusted platform here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We reflect on progress and positive African narratives. We're here to explore the trends, talents, transformations that are shaping Africa today, locally and globally. And so continue to listen in this meaningful dialogue, fresh perspectives and stories that remind us why Africa's future is bright. And we're delighted that we have Professor Mandi Rukuni, who is with us in the studio today. We're talking about dismantling dual economies. The thoughts that you are sharing, the ideas you are sharing are powerful. And I'm saying to myself, what do we do to create for you to share with the greater populations around Africa, so that it's just Zimbabwe, it's not just Southern Africa, it's not just Zimbabwe, Africa, close to you, but the rest of Africa needs to benefit from this. Now, I know that you have great opportunities to interact with different organizations and governments across Africa. And I'm really hoping that that is on the increase, because the ideas that you're sharing with us are ideas that are needed yesterday. Because to change structure, you have to be intentional. It's not something that just happens, whimsically or haphazardly. There has to be a strategy. And I'm wondering, how do we, for lack of a better word, how do we cone? How do we remodel? How do we transform? How do we reproduce Rukunis, Professor Rukunis around Africa, so that this thinking catches on like wildfire?
Uh, well, admittedly, there's quite a bit of decolonization of the mind that needs to happen. And I'm saying this without trying to be derogatory. I'm just honestly saying all of us, me included, underestimated the extent to which we have to analyze our situation, understand ourselves to a point where we're not afraid to challenge anything. And if you see what has happened with the Asian tigers and the dragon, it's not like the Western world or the global North does not really know why Africa is struggling, but it does help to say it's their problem. And to some extent, to a large extent, now it's our problem, because we're not analyzing the problem ourselves. To a large extent, they will pretend that no, it's because we are not smart, we are corrupt, we are struggling to run democratic systems, we are struggling with economic governance issues, which at a lower level of analysis we would all agree with. But when you look at a higher level, the solution is to start with us, first of all, agreeing that the architects of colonialism, the architects were far ahead of us. They gave us frameworks all over the place which make us difficult to walk out of the colonial systems, the education system itself, religion, the political systems, they all make it difficult to walk out of a dual economy because elections happen in. Let's start with education. The educational system is not intended to do the kind of analysis that I'm talking about. The educational system basically, and our fault is that we have not interrogated the educational system. I'm chairman of the Zimbabwe Council of Higher Education myself for the last 2 years, and my biggest issue is simply that although the government has declared a heritage-based education 5.0 framework, we as academics and scholars, we still analyze everything within the framework of our colonizers. How do we teach our children using textbooks written by Mr. Brown's 10,000 miles away? We still do that. Instead of gathering all the knowledge globally and then contextualizing it and the foundation being our own knowledge. So the educational system does not teach critical thinking skills. Very little that we teach. And me as a professor, when I became conscious, this is a weakness in my teaching, scrambling to correct that. Critical thinking skills are a very limited a component of our learning systems and process, problem-based learning, being able to challenge everything. So the religion that whether it's Christianity or Islam is designed to stop people questioning things. When you question something, then you are going to go to hell. You should not even question these things. And yet the Europeans themselves discovered 200 years ago. You have to question these things. But after 2,000 years of believing the same stuff, now you have to say, now we know more than we did 2,000 years ago. That's why they call that period the age of reason. And today, the age of reason for Europeans, you can experience it, whether you're in the United States or Europe, they also have Christianity as part of the culture, not as part of the thinking process. It's just a cultural thing. So education has to be part of the culture, not outside, because people are not discouraged from being Christians, but who goes to church in England? People have abandoned the churches, they're being converted into offices and stuff. But in Africa, we close factories and convert them to churches and then start praying for jobs, you see. So religion, education, and the political system is riding a tiger. It's a revolving belt. Every 4 years to go to elections in countries where the economy cannot run an electoral democracy the way you do in the United States. Electoral democracy is an end result of an industrialized society where 95% of the people are not just urban, but the systems to hold elections for everything, from councillors or to this is very expensive. And by the way, I am now very convinced that it's that inability on the part of Africans to know when we're just copying and pasting to when we are really doing serious thinking for ourselves. Now, for Africans, copying and pasting is still what we do, but show me a copy which is better than the original, Doctor. Okay, doesn't happen. Okay, that's why we have to learn from the Asian tigers. That's why we have to learn from Japan, which was the first country to be able to fully understand what to borrow the technology from the Westerners. But even that, when you bring it to Japan, you adapt it. When the Japanese are done with it, it's a Japanese idea. Okay, so we Africans have to learn that. We borrow all these brilliant ideas from everywhere in the world, but when we are done with the idea, it should be an African idea. So this is where doing ourselves a disservice is inability to question the political system, the religions, and the education system, so that we can adapt all those belief systems to the reality of our situation And I don't need to say this to you. Our civilization was just as advanced as any. The fact that we were colonized does not mean to say our civilization was inferior. An inferior civilization can overrun a more advanced civilization because you got a bigger guns and you got more violent people. Okay, so being defeated militarily does not necessarily mean that whoever has defeated you is a more advanced human being or civilization. If you look at the brutality that colonization brought, even to our own little country, Zimbabwe, the level of brutality cannot be civilized people. Okay, they're more advanced than we were. They're not necessarily more civilized than we were, but when you are immersed in their language, their religion, their political systems, you are on a path dependency. You are dependent on going down that path, even when you know the path does not lead anywhere. So path dependency is where every African country is. You walk down the path of education, you send your kid to school, knowing fully well by the time they graduate, they're not going anywhere. You walk down the path of elections and all that, but by the time you are done with that, it doesn't solve your political problems. And you can say that the same thing about our economic policies. It won't make the poor richer, it just makes the wealthy wealthier and the poor poorer. Okay.
Professor Rukuni, you are being successful in making me angry in a good way. And I like that because I mean, honestly speaking, you are challenging us to look at things differently. You are asking us to uh, revolutionaries, culturally, economically, and in all of life. It's okay to borrow ideas from somewhere, but you have to adapt them so that they become local. And this is very inspirational. And our viewers and our listeners, you are listening to Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. If you haven't done so already, please go and download our app from the Apple Store or Google Play so that you can visit the website and even tap the donate button so that you can make contributions and help us continue to support some of the educational endeavors and attempts and innovations that we have for our young people in the community. And also feel free to connect with Love Bay Afrobeat. You can contact them. They are on WhatsApp at 437-778-3299. Again, the number is 437-778-3299. And this is a trusted platform for insight, for progress, positive African narratives. And we are in conversation with Professor Rukuni here, and I told him that we just got started. And again, I have to blame you indirectly. You were a few minutes late, and our time is almost up. And I'm reminded in terms of critical thinking. You mentioned how the Chinese have handled their economy and their life to this day. And I'm reminded of what Mzee Kambarage Julius Nyerere did. He realized, he said, listen, this idea that I introduced is not taking us anywhere. So let's make adjustments. And we need people who are that brave, people who are flexible, people who are willing to be critical thinkers and look for solutions from within. And if anything, from some of the things you mentioned today, you're saying that we are not critically thinking about solutions. We need to come up with problem-based training. We need to look at life differently. And I think for the most part, you talked about copy and paste. And most of the time, as long as we continue to do that, we are not even appreciating the underlying structures and philosophies that have shaped the Western culture. We admire the lifestyle. We love the bling blings, but we don't know where they're coming from. And as a result, when you look at some of the things that are happening across Africa, actually, this is where, of course, not everything in Africa is wrong, and you are aware of that, and we all know that there's some great things happening, that there are these rural initiatives that are impacting nations. I hear of my brothers and sisters in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Zimbabwe, in Botswana, who are building these expensive homes and structures in the rural area and saying, listen, I don't need to live in the city. And now that I've established this, what else can we do? And they are getting into serious, poultry projects and piggery and farming, vegetables and crops. And I'm thinking, this is exciting. And I think this is part of the revolution you're referring to, because I think once we start doing this, it's going to impact, a lot of things even in future. I was talking even to my significant other, and we're looking into, land that, we have acquired in Zimbabwe, and we want to put them to use. And we're saying, listen, we have to be intentional. We have to be strategic in terms of doing this. And I have brothers and sisters in Ghana. One of my cousins actually works on a farm in Nigeria from Zimbabwe. And I'm thinking, wow, here's someone who is making a difference, intercontinentally. And sometimes we don't even get to celebrate that. Now, I know that our time is up, Professor Rukuni, and we didn't do justice to some of these things that we're talking about. But you have said a number of things. If you were to say, listen, I need to wrap up here, but here are some things I want to leave with you so that next time we'll be able to pick up on that. What would be some of those nuggets you'd like to leave with us today, sir?
So the most important point to remember that in Africa, we're in a dual economy, meaning we will end up in a low income or middle income trap. We don't go beyond that. Now, because it's a structural problem, we have to know that there is no other solution but a structural one. It's not a self-solving solution through elections, rights, being able to have what you might call semblance of Western civilization. It's not that. It's the structure of the economy. And one most important characteristic of a dual economy is that urbanization continues to happen fast, but there is no manufacturing in the cities. When people are rushing into the cities, leaving rural areas, it's because of poverty. It's because they also want social services in the cities, but there's no manufacturing, there's no housing. So that is a most important characteristic which every government has to recognize. As long as our people are rushing into the cities and there's no manufacturing growth in the cities, you are hardening the dual economy part of the economy. This is why you are now beginning to see some reversal. People coming out of the cities, going back to the rural areas. It's happening independent of government policies, because mega cities are not nice places. When you make it in the city, the poor people who are desperate for jobs in the cities are trekking to the urban areas. Those who have made it are trekking back to the rural areas and picking up some land, building those nice houses. But guess what? The houses are being built in the middle of no services, no roads, no public roads, so etc., etc. So my parting words are: it is extremely important for people to do research, analyze and understand, ask questions. Why is it that Africa only manufactures 1.5% of all manufactured goods and services in the world? 1.5%. It's not acceptable. But if we just double it to 3%, and to double it to 3% or even increase it to 5-6%, most of that manufacturing is to start in the rural areas. And our governments have to remember, we need one economy, not two economies, urban, rural, which are not connected. We need manufacturing as the glue that connects the rural and the urban, and that must uplift rural and urban people at the same time. And Africa can do it. Grow, like I say, at 6% per annum average over the next 30 to 50 years, we're the largest economy, without any doubt, and will be probably manufacturing a large chunk of the world's manufactured goods and services. Thank you very much.
Professor Rukuni, it's always a pleasure to have you, sir. And like we said, we will definitely have you back. And we just tapped into some of the ideas that you were sharing with us. And I just feel like time just slipped away. But you have shared.
I apologize.
You have
Next
shared.
time, I'll set a timer.
Understandable. Next time, we definitely need to focus on some of these things that you have just with us. And we not thank you enough for having graced us in the studio today. We have been having this conversation with Professor Rukuni, who is one of the finest African academician, thought leader, transformational leader, who is making a difference and has made a difference. And we just feel so honored that he made time to be with us today. And again, this is Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. And we want to thank you for joining us as we reflected on the ideas and voices that are shaping our continent, the beloved continent of Africa. Remember, Africa's strength lies in its people, its innovation, and the unstoppable spirit. Until next time, we want you to stay informed, stay inspired, and keep on keeping on believing in Africa. This is today's Africa, where the future is always in focus. And again, thank you for being with us today. By the way, we want you to know that coming up at 1 p.m. on the clock, the Caribbean Flavor with Mr. Marcus and Miss Gentle Blue will be on. So do not miss that. And of course, Africa, today's Africa is live every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So again, thank you for being with us. Remember, today's Africa, where the future is always in focus. Thank you for joining us.